everyone, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Marshall eLearning and Ciphr. Today we're looking at how to create effective, engaging training programs for FCA-regulated companies. I'm Catherine and I'm Ciphr's Head of Content and your host for today. Joining me are Victoria Sena, founder of Cherrybank Consulting and Marshall's subject matter expert when it comes to all things FCA and regulatory compliance. We're also joined by Andrea Matkin, who's the LMS sales manager here at Ciphr. Welcome, Victoria and Andrea. It's great to have you with us today. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to look at recent changes to legislation and regulations in the sector, including the consumer duty. We're also going to look at new courses coming to Marshall's e-learning catalogue over the coming months. We'll also discuss training priorities for HR and L&D teams in FCA-regulated companies, as well as how to structure programmes of learning for different job roles and seniority levels, and what to include in effective ongoing annual training programmes. We'll also take a quick look at how Ciphr LMS can help you engage learners through learning journeys and capture records of learners' progress. Before we get started, I'd like to give you a quick overview of Ciphr's products and services, just in case you haven't come across us before. Ciphr is a leading UK-based provider of integrated HR, payroll, learning and recruitment solutions. Our integrated HCM platform helps organisations manage their end-to-end employee lifecycle so they can deliver an amazing employee experience. More than 600 organisations use Ciphr solutions globally across the public, private and non-profit sectors. And a quick introduction to Marshall eLearning. They became part of Ciphr Group earlier this year. Marshalls have been innovators in people development for more than 20 years and are experts in diversity and inclusion in particular. They have exemplary client retention with many partnerships spanning more than 10 years, many higher education institutions in the UK using Marshall's courses. All of Marshall's courses are regularly updated to ensure they are relevant and legislatively accurate. And they use in-house specialists as well as external specialists such as Victoria to make sure the content is all up to date. And with those introductions out of the way, I'm going to hand over to Victoria to tell you a little bit more about her experience and then get stuck into the main part of our broadcast.
Thanks. So hi, good morning everyone. I'm Victoria, a subject matter expert at Marshall's. Just by way of background, I started my career on what was the FSA graduate programme, doing rotations in authorisations, banking supervision and insurance before moving over to the Bank of England at legal cutover. I was also fortunate enough to complete 2 secondments, one to the Treasury Select Committee of the House of Commons and another to Whitehall. After 8 years at the bank, I moved to the private sector where I was a group risk manager for an international insurance group, followed by a chief operating officer of an FSA-regulated asset manager where I was a CF1 and a CF30. I founded Cherrybank Consulting and have been working with Marshall eLearning, now part of the Ciphr Group, since 2019. I work with startups and scale-ups in the areas of operations, risk and compliance, and I work across a range of sectors including insurers, asset managers, wealth managers, banks and payment service providers. So I'm fairly sector agnostic. I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Securities Investments and I've got a diploma in investment operations. I also hold a number of non-exec and advisory roles for regulated firms. So recent legislative and regulatory changes. So here we have a table of recent changes to legislation and regulations in the sector. This is really just a quick snapshot that I put together fairly quickly. There's a lot out there, but these were the main ones that I felt were relevant. So the column on the left-hand side are all high-profile regulations that have come into effect since December last year. The middle column are reactions to external factors, notably the interest rate crisis, LIBOR fixing scandal, and the proliferation of crypto. And the right-hand column are ongoing regulatory changes. For example, HM Treasury ran a call for evidence on the senior managers and certification regime from the 30th of March to the 1st of June this year, while the Bank of England ran 3 roundtables in July, focusing on various aspects of the Solvency II regime. So this isn't an exhaustive list, it was really just off the top of my head, and it goes to show how much change is going on. So if we look at the next slide, this obviously causes problems, but there are solutions, so I'll take you through them. The problems are that these examples illustrate that the regulatory world is constantly changing and evolving. Firms need to help their people keep pace with change, and they cannot expect staff to know the whole handbook. So I've often seen people quote how tall the handbook would be if it was printed out, but another way of thinking about it is in terms of money. It would cost over £3,800 for an annual printed subscription of the handbook. This illustrates it's almost impossible for everybody to keep track. But if you don't keep track with regulatory changes, you'll lose your competitive edge and fall behind. You could also breach regulations. You will see in some training courses that I've written, I've collated data on the FCA fines that really help to focus the mind. For example, in 2022, the FCA issued fines of over £9 million for failing related to gifts and inducements. So turning to solutions, the FCA issues a regulatory roundup email, which is really helpful. They also host events, and their website is a good place to start. There are also industry groups such as the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, the CSI, CFA, ACA, etc. You can engage consultants such as myself, and you can also do e-learning. Annual training keeps people up to speed on all of these changes. The first two solutions will really only tell you what you need to comply with, whereas the latter two solutions will tell you how to comply with those changes. So we'll now turn our focus to e-learning. So I've listed out here the benefits of e-learning. E-learning benefits both peoples as individuals and firms as a whole. On the people side of things, it helps develop skills and knowledge. Being better at your job just makes you feel empowered and frankly makes everything a bit easier. It also helps with career progression. Those who want to progress in their careers will find it so much easier to evidence their personal growth by undertaking training. Career progression can be a promotion, it can be moving to a different area, or it can be taking on additional responsibilities that give you a purpose. Thirdly, training helps people to comply with regulations. You need to personally meet continuous professional development requirements set by regulations and memberships. Turning to the firm side of things, FCA authorizations and compliance is fairly high. So not just when you first gain authorization, but anytime you want to make a change to individuals, you'll be required to provide documentary evidence of their competence. For example, I recently assisted a firm to promote a staff member to undertake SMF functions. They were required to provide documents, some of which didn't exist, so I helped to create them. That includes their induction program, skills gap analysis, learning and development plan, and a competency assessment. The second benefit of e-learning is upskilling. So you benefit staff by developing their skills and knowledge, and that obviously benefits your company. The third benefit is leveling. So e-learning gets staff to your levels of compliance. All firms are different, and any training you give to staff at the start of their journey will benefit you the most. And fourthly, there's values as well. So training gets staff aligned with your company values. This can be done through bespoke training, introducing your company values and key people. It could also be done by requiring participants to undertake training in climate change or equality and diversity. Finally, risk management. So training is a form of risk management in itself, and people cannot plead ignorance to the rules. A high-profile example is Charlotte Hogg, who was promoted to Deputy Governor at the Bank of England. However, the Treasury Select Committee of the House of Commons discovered she had not declared her brother, who worked at Barclays, as a conflict of interest. She had not completed the conflict of interest register, which the Bank of England admitted was common practice for senior management at the time. She chose to resign, which was a big loss to the Bank of England in terms of her talent and their reputation. So Marshall's new compliance courses. So here we have a list of all the 20 new courses. I've already finished writing half of these, and they are now with Marshall's for development. I'll just run through the topics. I can't talk about all of them specifically, but we have some hot topics such as the consumer duty, which is live, and the senior managers and certification regime. I'm waiting to release that one until the Treasury has released their reflections on a consultation they ran earlier this year. We then have some environmental modules, which I'm writing to complement the existing courses on climate change and environmental sustainability offered by Marshall's. We then have some courses around risk and risk management, for example, on gifts and inducements and communication. We then have an introduction to regulators series. I wrote these to introduce people to the FCA, the Bank of England, the Pensions Regulator, the Financial Ombudsman Service, and the Information Commissioner's Office. These detail what their main responsibilities are, how they are structured, and who the main people are at these organisations. Finally, I've written a spotlight series where I focus on 5 key regulations, including looking at their aims and objectives, their key features, and what the future holds for them with regards to consultations. These are examples like the Insurance Distribution Directive and Solvency II. So these 20 courses complement 17 existing compliance courses, which are shown on the next slide here, some of which I wrote. These are all kept up to date. For example, the vulnerable customers and treating customers fairly training were updated in light of the Consumer Duty, and the Bribery Act 2010 has also been updated. All of this is made possible by the subject matter experts as well as Marshall's development team. If you have any courses you would like to see in addition to these, please drop me an email. In addition to the compliance courses that I've just listed on these two slides, Marshall's also has a huge range of diversity courses on the next slide, such as unconscious bias and neurodiversity at work, as well as management courses, such as managing remote teams and microaggressions, which are on the next slide. So I totted it up on the Marshall's website, and I realized that Marshall's has over 110 courses to choose from. So if you needed to do 15 courses a year, that's 7 years worth of content, which is impressive. We can also make bespoke courses, which I've listed out on the next slide. For example, we can introduce your company mission, your company risk appetite, and also your flexible benefits or IT security. So please do get in touch. On the next slide, we'll now look at training priorities for HR and L&D teams in FCA-regulated companies. So in this section, we're going to discuss what the training priorities should be. I've come up with these three, and I'll take you through what I mean by each one in the next slides, starting with bespoke. So by bespoke priority, where I'm trying to get at is that no one size fits all. People are all on different schedules, different functions, different career paths, and they have different interests. For firms involved in insurance distribution, the FCA does not define what's meant by appropriate knowledge and ability in order to complete their tasks and perform their duties adequately, but it's down to each firm to decide this in relation to the specific products they design and sell and the functions they undertake. The number one rule is that training programs should not be boring. There is so much good content out there. So I'll take you through the 6 steps to structuring learning programs. The first step is to establish CPD requirements. You need to figure out what an individual CPD requirement is, whether that's 10, 15, or even 35 hours. It really depends on a person's role, as mentioned previously. For example, the Insurance Distribution Directive requires all staff to complete 15 hours of CPD. The retail investment advisors require staff to complete 35 hours, of which 21 must be structured, i.e. e-learning. Meanwhile, the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investments, of which I'm a member, requires members to do 10 hours of CPD. The second step is to create categories. Categories help to guide users and make sure that continuing professional development is relevant to a person's role, which is an FCA requirement. I would suggest categorizing people in terms of being graduates, specialisms such as sales, operations, or compliance, whether they're doing an internal transition, whether they're in management, or whether they're in leadership. The third step is to design bespoke menus. You should make tailored menus for people within those categories. Here, choice is really important. I would suggest having some mandatory training modules, perhaps 4 of the 10. And for firms involved in insurance distribution, these mandatory training modules should cover specific areas which the FCA refers to as minimum knowledge criteria. For example, around product knowledge, claims process, or insurance regulation. Then, within those categories, let people choose the rest for themselves based on their skills gaps and learning objectives. They should be able to choose from regulatory training, diversity and inclusion, management, and leadership. Looking at the next step, I think it's important to mix up the format. I mentioned earlier that training can be structured as well as unstructured. So structured learning includes e-learning and in-person training. Note that one-to-ones need to be structured and recorded if you want to count them. And structured learning can also include qualifications such as those offered by CSI, CFA, ACA, etc. Unstructured learning includes webinars like the one that you're on, and you'll receive a certificate of attendance at the end of the webinar. I've also rolled out new risk management frameworks and business continuity plans. Each of these sessions counted as continuous professional development for the people that I was giving those sessions to within the companies. Staff can also undertake reading and research as well as coaching and mentoring. It's important to note that CPD training does not always have to be CPD certified. So while certified training is a mark of quality, and Marshall e-learning has that, variety is just as important. Turning to the 5th step, it's important to be both reactive and proactive. You should tie training into your company values. For example, Earth Day is on the 22nd of April. If your company is serious about climate change, relevant training on that day would tie in nicely. Another example might be if you're releasing a new product, you could have sales record a training session all about its features and target customer and roll that out to all the people in your organization. Finally, if you have a new CEO or another member of senior management, you could have them record a quick video on their experience and priorities. Turning to the last step, I think it's important to foster accountability, empower people and make them accountable. It is not HR or L&D's job to chase people. Instead, you should set personal objectives and targets in an LMS system, run quarterly checks through that system, and make sure people have time to do the training. Secondly, you should incentivize people. Whoever completes their training gets entered into a raffle, or they get a budget for additional learning, such as they could do, IMC or LinkedIn courses, and they could even get an extra day of holiday, perhaps. Another incentive or another important thing to do is to penalize people. So, for example, if people aren't keeping up with their training, you can add a module to the LMS which details the importance of training itself. The next priority is holistic. So by holistic, I mean that it's important that you tie the various processes together. So here we've got a continuous cycle between skills gap analysis, which should feed into an individual's learning and development. That should be followed up with the relevant policies and procedures that relate to that learning and development. And finally, a competency assessment should take place to make sure that all of that has been understood. For example, if you take something like conflicts of interest training, that should be accompanied by your company's policy, procedure, and conflicts of interest register for them to complete. Another example might be risk management, where you would give them a policy, a procedure, a risk register, and a breaches log so that they understand how all of these things connect together. We'll turn to the next priority. Here, I think in order to be efficient, it's really important to utilize technologies. Skills gap analysis tools and competency assessments are built into LMS systems, and LMS systems can provide records management, which is required by the regulations such as the Insurance Distribution Directive. The FCA can request the name of the person responsible for this at any time, and it needs to be easily auditable. You can fully tailor the user experience by creating learning pathways, and here you can achieve the holistic aim by including best practice documents, policies, procedures, and register within the learning journey. This ensures that people actually engage with the training. Gamification is also possible within LMS systems in order to avoid boredom and provide people with a sense of adventure and, importantly, progress. Finally, you can also do top-down management where necessary. For example, if you're releasing a new product, or you have a new member of staff, or everybody needs to do consumer duty training, that can be added to everybody's LMS. So it's helpful to talk about some good and bad examples. So a bad example would be a company sets the same 6 training courses for all staff, and they're required to complete it by the 31st of December, and they receive alert the day before, and everybody just does it on the very last day of the year. Let's compare that to a good example where, let's take a couple of new starters in a company. So you might have a graduate. You issue them with 4 mandatory e-learnings in their first month, so they're only doing 1 a week. They complete their skills gap analysis, and then based on that, you can offer them a selection of e-learning and other resources for them to choose from in order to fill in those gaps. These can be spread out so that they do 1 every month after their first month, and that will get you easily to 15 CPD in one year. At the end of that year, you can then complete a competency assessment. For an experienced hire, you might have them do 10 training sessions in the first month and then spread out 1 every month after that, and that will get you to their 21 hours of CPD. They will also need to do, or may need to do, 14 more hours of unstructured CPD through the year, which can be reading and webinars, but that's a lot easier to fit in around that structured training. Thanks very much for your time. I will now hand over to Andrea to hear more about the Ciphr LMS system.
Great, thanks Victoria. So lots of things to think about there in terms of your overall training and development. So let's just take a few moments and we can have a look at how that sort of technology piece and that efficiency piece can help you deliver the right learning experience for your different employees. First and foremost, so Victoria talked about, having, different modules that you can push out. The whole thing is around making learning engaging for your employees. So regardless of whether they're doing FCA training, whether they're doing management, whether they're doing pre-boarding, it doesn't really matter. But giving an opportunity to pull all that together in a way that's going to be meaningful for your employees is really key. So one of the things that we can really offer is tools to create quite visual learning pathways. So you can see here an example of an image where you can put pins on a journey and make it quite visual and contextualize around what the learner is completing. These can then be assigned to roles and functions. So like the example that Victoria was just giving, that you could have a slightly different pathway for a graduate or a new starter versus someone who's got a specialism in a particular product or area within your business. This means that people are always going to get that relevant training for their role, and they're not just going to be going through the motions of the training and not sort of realizing the importance of why they're doing it. Obviously, you can build all this into induction programs, and you can kind of set rules and logic so it ekes out the training at the appropriate times throughout that program. So people aren't feeling overwhelmed by the amount of training they need to do. They're just being delivered what they need to do at the right time throughout the year. And also that sort of incentivization, that gamification. We've seen this work really well with a lot of our clients that we work with. So using the badges and leaderboards to motivate. So you can like tailor the badges within the platform. You can assign those to different products, to different legislations, different policies. And you can have those leaderboards to kind of track who's completing their training and potentially link that to rewards, ideally, or like you say, it could also push them on to further training if they're not completing what they need to within a timely fashion. That's kind of bringing the horse to water, so to speak, and getting them to drink, but then also having the ability to kind of come in here and sort of assess where those sort of skill gaps and competencies are. So if there are sort of clear sort of frameworks that your business is working towards, you've got the ability to upload these into the LMS. You can get learners to self-assess against those competencies, just to identify very quickly where their strengths are sitting and where the development areas might be lying. But in addition to that, just to kind of provide a more, I guess, objective result, you can have that 180 and 360 degree assessment. So their manager could come in and do that same assessment, their peers or senior managers higher up could do that same assessment. So you get a really robust picture of where your skills are lying, and if there's a bit of a difference in opinion as well, because whilst we might think we're great at something, my manager might have a different opinion, and that opens up a constructive discussion around why that is. So this tool, gives a really nice picture of where those skills and competency areas or development areas might lie. So you can see on the screen here, you've got this sort of spider chart that visualizes those results. But the nice thing about this is that you can then sort of curate what training links to those competencies. So the learner will do that assessment. They might fall below the benchmark on a particular area, and the system will then automatically recommend training that they can go off and review and complete in between those sort of one-to-ones and performance reviews. So it's really empowering your employees to take ownership of their learning and to focus on the areas that are going to make the most difference in their day-to-day jobs. Those analytics that the system delivers as well. So you can see on the bottom right hand side, that's a sort of manager and administrator view. You can then start to get a holistic view across your teams of where there's kind of key gaps. So you've got the individual results in the reports, but equally you've got that sort of holistic view. So you can sort of see in particular parts of my business, I might have some major gaps that I need to assess as a broader training initiative in the next period ahead. So really key for that in-role development, but also thinking about using that potentially for succession planning and skills development. Of course, monitoring and managing those compliance rates is key. So for all those reasons that sort of Victoria outlined, so making sure that you're up to date and you're sort of, you've got your market edge, but also that you're complying with your regulatory requirements. So you're not risking fines or any other sort of consequences as a result of being non-compliant with legislation that is coming up. So you can see here, you've got the ability to assign due dates. So that's really key for learners to be able to sort of see what's coming up for renewal, and more importantly, if it is overdue, so that they've got that sort of flag saying, hey, you're now overdue with your training, this needs to be completed urgently. You can be copying in managers to those notifications as well, so that they can be also helping you from an L&D perspective to deliver that training and sort of, again, taking that ownership and accountability for their teams to ensure that everyone is up to date with what they need to do. Notifications can be pinged around or for all those sort of approaching due dates and overdues, but there's also other sort of logic and workflows that you can automate as well to ensure that people stay on track, that they're rewarded for their learning, and that you as an administrator and from an L&D perspective or a compliance management perspective, you can be running those reports to sort of see where everyone is up to. Speaking of reports, obviously dashboards and reporting is going to be really key. So when you've got that auditor knocking on your door and wanting to sort of see who's completed that training, you've got that ability at the click of a button to be able to run reports to see immediately who's overdue. Ideally, you don't want to be showing them that. You want to show them a nice report saying that everyone's up to date with their training. But you can obviously use those reports to monitor that over time to make sure that when you do get audited, you've got that confidence that people are up to date with their training and you've got everything in place that needs to be there. To help with that, learners and managers all have access to dashboards in their own systems. So as a learner, I can go in and see a nice sort of traffic light system of where I'm up to with my training. They can be put on the home pages as well to make it front and center of what I need to do. But equally, managers can be set up with dashboards as well. So they've got real-time visibility of where their teams are up to, with the ability to drill down into the individual details as needed. There's a full suite of reports in the system as well that can track that completed, approaching due date and overdue training. These can be made accessible to managers as well for their own teams, and we can do sort of multi-hierarchical right up to those senior managers if they want to see right down the organizational hierarchy as well. We can push out sort of data to Power BI and the likes with APIs as well. So if there's other metrics across your business that you want to be aligning those training results rates with, you've got that capability as well. And then, of course, those manager notifications can be pinged out. So if there's overdue training coming up in their teams, they can be alerted to that. So again, they could be supporting that training effort at the sort of grassroots level.
So just to recap on what we've covered so far today, we noticed that the regulatory landscape in the sector is constantly changing and that firms need to help their people to keep up. We talked about how Victoria highlighted how if we were going to print out the FCA handbook, it could cost you more than £3,000. So that is a lot of paper and a lot of pages of information to get through. While the FCA industry groups will tell you what you need to comply with, consultants like Victoria and e-learning experts such as Marshalls will tell you how to comply with regulations. Marshalls has 20 new compliance courses for this sector launching this summer, plus a range of other e-learning courses on topics ranging from diversity and inclusion to better management and soft skills. All of these can help contribute to building a well-rounded career progression structure for your people. Training programs should be bespoke to roles and seniority, for example, holistic and efficient. And Andrea showed us how Ciphr LMS can help you with this efficiency challenge with features such as automated notifications and learner record management, as well as structuring those learning journeys and using the skills gap analysis tool to identify gaps in people's knowledge and expertise and suggesting next steps and interventions for them. A question from Anita for you, Andrea. They already have a HR system and no desire to change, but our LMS is separate. Is Ciphr LMS available as a standalone system?
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely supply that as a standalone module. We can then set up a data feed with your main HR platform to automate that user profile creation and set up from there.
Victoria, just a question from me, sort of going back to sort of structuring learning programs for different categories of employees. Is there any one that's like a particularly good place to start, or is it something that needs to be sort of done company-wide at the same time? Just trying to break down the scope of work for people, because there's quite a lot to cover.
No, it's a good question. What I found working well, both in companies when I was a group risk manager, but also as a consultant, is if you're rolling something out new, it's always best to take the path of least resistance. So look across the business and find whichever department is the most keen for this kind of change. So it could be that that's the HR and L&D area. It could be that it's the product area or the sales area. Find champions within the company who really want to upskill their people and change that department first. Then you can show the rest of the company, look at what a difference it's made to this area. We think you should do this too. Because sometimes people just need to see a bit of evidence before they put in the hard work. So that would be my suggestion.
Oh, great advice, thank you. Yeah, the choosing champions is really critical to rolling out. I think like any change program, whether that's training or launching a new LMS or just any kind of organizational change, starts with identifying people, like almost activators in each department who can then get the rest of their teams on board. Victoria, another question from Ian. What do you think are the 2 or 3 most critical training topics at present that firms should be paying attention to?
I think the consumer duty is a huge training topic, which is why the consumer duty training is 8,000 words, which I wrote, which has then been transferred into a much more engaging training session that Marshall's put together. So I'd definitely take a look at that one. Outside of that, I think risk management is always going to be really, really critical to any business. And then if I was going to pick a third, I'd probably look at, you know, something in the diversity and inclusion space. I think Marshall's is in particular really expert in that area. It's not a hot topic, it's here to stay. And I think there's a lot of changing and adjusting that has to be done. Marshall's really took the lead, I think, during COVID and really led the way, and that's what's attracted so many companies to use their products. So I'd definitely look in that space for some training.
If you'd like to learn more about e-learning courses from Marshall's or about Ciphr's HR and LMS software, you can email us at info@ciphr.com. If you want to learn more about Cherrybank Consulting, Victoria's email address and the website address is on the screen now. And just before I close, I'm just going to pick up one last question. Do you have to engage with a whole suite of Marshall's e-learning, or can you pick a mix and upload your existing LMS? Both options are available. You can pick and choose as you need, or you can choose like a subscription model and choose to take a certain volume of courses per year, and then kind of choose what courses make up, say, 10 or 15 courses per year that you subscribe to. So all of those options are possible. We also offer, through the Ciphr brand, like pre-selected packs of content around specific themes like DNI or Manager's Toolkit in both like full e-learning and micro-learning options. So lots of options to support you there. If you want to discuss your training needs and how our content might support you in that, drop us a line and we will get one of our experts to give you a call and discuss those requirements. Yeah, so please do let us know if we can help you. Thank you, Victoria, for sharing your expertise and putting this all together, and all your hard work on the courses. Like, a huge amount of work's gone into that, and they're really looking good. Andrea, thank you so much for sharing with us a little bit more about Ciphr LMS. Appreciate you both joining us today, and thanks to everyone on the call for taking part. We hope to see you on another webinar again soon. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.